Okay, so did you know that social work is a profession that was established in the late 19th century to ensure that immigrants and other vulnerable people gain tools and skills to escape economic and social poverty? And since then, it's really continued to evolve, but it's stayed along this premise that, there's needs within society that definitely need to be addressed, all of society's problems, and we're really good at making sure that we continue to give it the attention that it deserves. And in case you're thinking, well, that's great, but I've never really worked with a social worker before or don't have a pressing social issue, think again. Today, you'll probably enjoy many privileges because of a social worker, because a social worker saw some injustice somewhere and took action. Things like laws against, child abuse or elder abuse and neglect, the protection of civil rights for all people, regardless of gender, race, faith, or sexual orientation. People with mental illness and developmental disabilities are now afforded humane treatment. Schools now have social workers. Offices are utilizing social workers to craft their well-being programs to protect productivity. And clinically, we can even assess mental illness and provide effective treatment. So we are everywhere, right? So if you have not met a social worker yet, as our roles continue to evolve, I can guarantee you that one day you will. But for now, welcome back to our interview series celebrating the profession of social work for Social Work Month. And today I'm excited to introduce to you another dynamic social worker. But before I tell you who she is, I'm Amanda Fludd, a licensed clinical social worker, speaker, coach, entrepreneur, and curator of this audacious project trying to get to 31 social workers for the month. We are well on the way, and it's been giving, just perspective of who we are, and I think opening our eyes to the variety of our field and the potential for the work that we do and the amazing work that we do. And today, we get to share in that dynamic and understand that a little bit more with social worker Monique Dunn. So hello, Monique.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
A pleasure to have you. And Monique is the owner of Destination Therapy, and you focus a lot on anxiety, burnout, and perfectionism. I think that's something that we can all relate to and may not even connect to social work, right? But, we're there in that space too. And before we even dive into that, can you tell us, what does breaking barriers mean to you?
Breaking barriers to me, it sounds really simple, but seems to be quite radical. And for me, it is showing up authentically as myself, empowering others to do the same. For me, that is breaking barriers. I think as a minority woman, business owner, professional, clinician, healthcare provider, showing up as myself is, I think, one of my biggest strengths and the best tools that I have to empower other clinicians and also my clients that I see in my therapy practice.
Powerful, right? It's like a coming into yourself, but it requires probably a bit of self-reflection to get to that place where you can do it for you and do it for others too.
Absolutely. And being authentic, not just when you're with your family or your friends, but showing up in professional spaces authentically, showing up in your clinical work as a clinician when people have ideas of what a therapist is, this serious, plain person who sits there, just writing notes. And instead just showing up fully as yourself. I think that's breaking barriers, and I think it's a powerful tool.
Can you tell us how you came into this profession and if you had to break barriers yourself to get here?
Yeah, so I never planned on becoming a social worker. I trained as a therapist in the UK. And in the UK, social workers traditionally work in child protection and, services for the elderly. Kind of what mainstream America thinks of social work too.
Yeah.
The role of social workers. And I actually come from a family of social workers. I have multiple aunts and cousins and some uncles who have worked in the foster care system and helping the elderly. And so I knew about traditional social work. And I went traveling. I was always in the arts. That was my thing. I was going to be an actor, singer, dancer, performer extraordinaire. Like that was the route I thought my life was going to take. And I went traveling when I was younger, and I volunteered at an orphanage in South Africa teaching. And the entire time I was there, the kids just kept coming to me and confiding in me and sharing things with me. And on that trip, multiple people on separate occasions asked me, have you ever considered being a counselor? Have you thought about becoming a therapist?
Wow.
And I had experienced therapy after my dad passed away. It was like very sudden. And I went to therapy, and I had this really great experience with this woman who didn't know me, didn't know my story, but was able to hold space for me. And it was incredibly healing. So I was like, actually, I mean, that's kind of cool. Like my therapist played this really great role in my life. So I came home and did a complete U-turn. I applied for school to become a therapist. 2 weeks later, I interviewed, got accepted, boom, like my whole trajectory changed.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I never planned on being a social worker. I trained in the UK. I trained as a therapist there. And then I wanted to travel, right? There's a theme here. I love to travel. And I thought, where else can I get the most diverse experience? My hometown was not giving it. So I thought New York City, like that's the place I'll.
Yes, New York will give you that for sure.
Yeah. And so I looked into it, but there's no reciprocity. So I realized in order to be a therapist in New York City, I would have to retrain.
Do it all over again. Yeah.
And I looked into different graduate programs and found social work. And I realized that I could get the certifications I needed to practice as a therapist, but I could also learn some of the non-clinical stuff that is so vital to therapeutic work, learning about systems and power, privilege, oppression, how that plays out in our world and how that impacts people. And so that's really why I chose social work. It wasn't just the clinical, what happens in the room, but it was looking at the person in their environment, right? And how they're showing up and how that affects them as they walk in the world. And so that's how I became a social worker.
Ooh, brilliant. And I love it because like I feel like your story is almost like in the reverse, because you're really focused on the counseling side, but you really recognize the power of like this whole person. And we're big on like the person environment fit, right? And what are all the parts that contributes to this person's life? And social work gets to give you that lens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh, just so magical. I love it.
I was launched in the streets of New York City to work, and that was an experience in and of itself. I was on a mobile crisis team in the Bronx.
Ooh, girl, they took you places. You were fully immersed.
I jumped 2 feet in, let me tell you. And I just learned so much. It was such a valuable experience. And I think while I'm not working on inpatient psych or in community mental health anymore, the things I saw and what I learned in those settings has been so valuable. Working now in private practice and now owning my own business where, we're able to support people here in Houston, which is where I live now.
Yeah, I think that's where I learned the most too. I was an inpatient psych for a very long time, and it's like you really see like what mental illness looks like. And I think it's something we may also kind of shy away from for like newer folks coming up in the field. But if you can get that experience, even if the benefits aren't great and there may be a lot of drawbacks, the learning, I think it's priceless. I think it sets you up to do really well. As a therapist, if that's what you decide to do, because that clinical exposure is priceless.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what is one thing that you feel people find surprising about your work as a social worker?
I think it's that people think of child protection if they hear social worker. I don't think everyone realizes that social workers can be advocates, are working in policy, are running programs, are doing all these other things. And a lot of clinicians are licensed clinical social workers. And so I think that seems to be surprising to people. I would go with that.
They're like layers to who we are and like what we do, right? And whether it's in a community level, like policy, a macro level, even within social work, like we've got social workers, we've got case managers, we've got clinical social workers, which requires just more training and work to kind of get there. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that one. I think we get lumped into this box, but even our box is diverse.
Right. Not all social workers do the same thing. We don't all have the same training. You use the title social worker, right?
Yeah.
You could be level, social worker, a master's level, LMSW, or a clinical social worker who has specifically done training that is clinical, that involves, diagnosis and treatment and psychotherapy specifically. And that, if you're looking for a therapist, is probably the type of social worker you're going to be looking for.
After. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it also speaks to, if you've had a not so good experience, like maybe the social worker and their skills just wasn't aligned with you and what you needed, right? So don't be turned off by that. I think it may just be exploring a little bit more, what you need and making sure that person can.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really important point. I think there's a whole section on my website that talks about that and just saying like it's always worth giving it another try, because I think the therapeutic relationship, so much of it is based on fit. Made for everybody and everybody ain't made for you, and that's okay. And so finding somebody that you can like, yeah, I can trust this person, I can work with this person, that's the goal. And when we at Destination Therapy, when we do consultations and intakes, we are very clear, like we're both assessing if this is a good fit here. This is not a sales pitch. We are here to see if we can work together, because we do long-term work. We want to establish real relationships where real trust is built. And so it's important to listen to your tingly senses. If you aren't feeling it, let them know, let them refer you to someone else. That's okay. A good social worker or a good therapist will refer you if that's what you want.
That's right. And they'll be okay with it too.
Yes. No egos.
Ooh, that might be a topic by itself. Professionally, we might have to work on that one bit, right? Like, I think we got to learn sometimes not to take things personal, and to also like keep working within our scope, like all of that. But
absolutely, I'm not the right therapist for everyone.
Right, and that is okay too. Yeah. Ooh, love it. So finish the sentence. I wish people understood social workers ...
I wish people understood social workers are incredibly valuable members of our society. There are a lot of, I don't know your audience, if there's a lot of people who are social workers themselves or wanting to become social workers or know a social worker. Do not assume that they are low value. Do not assume that if you're wanting to be a social worker, you cannot make money in this field. A lot of people are it's like drilled into a lot of people during social work school that, that you're a martyr, that, you're just in this to help people. And there's this idea, I don't know where it came from, to help people and to be in a helping profession, you shouldn't be making money. We don't tell that to surgeons. We don't tell that to nurse practitioners. We don't tell that to physician assistants. We don't tell that to a lot of people. So I think it's important for people to know that, you deserve to have a good quality of life, to pay student loans, to afford to do things with your family or with your friends, and that it's okay to make a living, in this field. And it
is possible. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. And, I hope that sits and resonates with someone, especially if you are, considering being in this profession or trying to, navigate. It is possible to, live comfortably within this profession. And I think at the same time, we're asking for folks that may be in positions of decision that we think about how we treat our social workers and how we compensate them for the level of work that they do and the things that they do for society as a whole, right?
Please, yes. And when you think about other mid-level healthcare providers that have gone to graduate school, most of them have taken out loans for graduate school. Then on top of graduate school, you're paying to give your time to some organization where you're an intern. Then after your internship and graduation, you then have to do at least 3 years in most states
Clinical hours.
Straight to get your clinical hours. You
Mm-hmm.
put the time in. We all put our time in.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve to make a living.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it starts with us, I think, carrying ourselves with that, degree of excellence, if you will, and then for folks to approach the profession, approach the field, approach your social worker as someone who's really worked hard and, really deserves that recognition as well. But Monique, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for your yes. Thank you for all that you do for the profession. On behalf of social work, as if I have some power, honey, but I applaud you for what you do.
Such a pleasure.
Oh,
And he's open to answering questions from you or other aspiring social workers, current social workers. And I'm sure you're going to post my information somewhere when you share this. So thank you.
Absolutely, yes. And to everyone else in the profession, we see you, we thank you, and happy Social Work Month. And for all of you taking this in, thank a social worker. Find them. We're everywhere. Say thank you. And even as a gesture of thank you with this, share it, right? Because there's so much that people need to understand about the complexities of social work. Monique, thank you again for joining me. Take care, everybody.